Section 9, closing costs, fees, and charges. So let's look here. I'm just going to get you used to looking at these asterisks to make sure you've got everything covered, okay? Costs. Now, what I like about this section, right, is that it just spells it out. This is what the seller is going to need to pay during this transaction, and this is what the buyer is going to pay. There's no gray area. There's no, gosh, what do I do? Blah, blah. Now, some of it's negotiable, right? Like the buyer's closing costs. The seller, you can ask the seller to pay for some of that or give you a credit, but it's a traditional cost that is typically paid by the buyer. So let's make sure we understand that and we clarify whoever we are working for, either the buyer or the seller, that we are counseling them on that. Title, evidence, and insurance. So at least, and this is likely one of those that can be left blank, 15 days, right? That you're going to get title evidence. So you need to know if you have, the buyer needs to know if the seller has clear and clean title. So that means that the chain of ownership has been verified by the title agent. And that means that they are offering title insurance. So title evidence, that's the commitment. You're going to get the commitment report, and that's what this is. Okay, it's often called the title commitment. ALTA, some realtors know it as ALTA, but what it is the title commitment. Okay, so let's call it by the right name. And so that's imperative. It's imperative that the buyer reviews that report for any discrepancies. It's imperative that the buyer's agent is looking through that report and the listing agent is looking through that report and counseling the buyer or the seller. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask that title agent for clarity. This is their job. They need to clarify anything, and you need to make sure they have the right information and everything's accurate. So here you go, line 168. All the asterisks will tell you where you need to go. Seller shall designate the closing agent and pay for the owner's policy and charges, or the buyer shall pay for the premium for buyer's lender's policy and charges for closing services related to the lender's policy. This is also about the buyer shall designate the closing agent. So this is how you choose. So the seller is either choosing or the buyer is choosing the closing agent. Now in Florida, the closing agent could be an attorney, or it could be an actual title agent or an escrow agent, as they're also called. So this is where you decide. Now in Miami-Dade, the buyer shall designate the closing agent. Okay, the seller shall furnish a copy of a prior owner's policy. Those are some slight differences. And if you are in NEFAR's area, up in Jacksonville and St. Augustine, then there's other differences with this section. So make sure you're looking at where the asterisks are pointing you, and then that'll help you, okay? The survey, so at least 5 days prior to closing, the buyer may, at the buyer's expense, have a property surveyed. I highly recommend doing this for any vacant land purchases. I highly recommend doing this for a rural area, and there's a lot of acreage, and you need to know where those survey lines are. I would say it's likely less important in a neighborhood that is filled with tract homes, meaning that they're close by and, it's a clear plat map of that neighborhood. It's clearly subdivided. It's a rather new neighborhood. That would probably be the least important to do a survey. But again, don't ever say to a buyer, oh yeah, you don't need this. Let them do everything they want to do. Okay, home warranty, line 184. There's an asterisk. Often a home warranty is wanted. Now, here's the thing, something to be said about the buyer, the pros and cons for the buyer and seller, right? So the seller often just sees this as another expense, and they don't want to have any more expenses, right, for this transaction. But as the seller's agent, you could say, look, the home warranty is releasing some liability for you. A week after closing, what if your dishwasher dies and the buyer goes back on you and says, you didn't know, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they could say whatever. The seller, if they purchased a home warranty for that buyer, guess what? The buyer's not going to be calling you. They're going to be calling the home warranty company and paying whatever fee it is to have them come out and fix it. It's just easier. So it releases liability for the seller. It's a warm and fuzzy for the buyer. They may never use it, but at least they have it. And they're usually about $500, between like 4 and 6 or something. So anyway, that's that. So then go down to 194. Seller shall pay installments due prior to closing, and buyer shall pay installments due after closing. So that's just clarity on that. Or the seller shall pay in full prior to closing any assessments allowed by the public body to be prepaid. So again, it's up for negotiation. That could be countered.